Police arrived on the scene due to a call from Pizzeria Uno, a restaurant whose manager reported that the men had a tractor trailer and were dumping something described as a pile of furniture at the rear of the pizzeria. Of the two men, one identified himself as Moshe Almakayas, age 30. This person fled the scene, according to police. The manager of the restaurant reported to the officers that the vehicle read Moving Systems Incorporated and included a phone number. The Middle Eastern man, later identified as Ron Qatar, age 23, exited the vehicle and said that the operator, 30-year-old Moshe Almakayas, was across the street. He was spotted with a Jewish female, Eilert Reisler, age 23, across the street, but she soon began to walk in the opposite direction of Almakayas as soon as she was spotted by the police. When Reisler was apprehended, searched, and questioned, she was found to have a German passport in her name and medication in another. Getting back to Almakayas, he stated that he didn't dump any furniture behind the restaurant and that he was on his way to a customer in New York. He was unable to provide either an address or phone number for the customer. When an arriving officer examined the vehicle, it was found to be in numerous violations and even not in safe working order, and was subsequently put out of commission. The truck was, in fact, loaded to 3/4 capacity with household items, boxes, and furniture. Officer Gerald Swartz of the Whitpain Police Department found a video camera amongst the load. Plymouth police officer David McCann reviewed the tape and found that it had footage of Chicago, but suspiciously had numerous zoom-in shots of the Sears Tower. The three suspects were eventually questioned by the FBI and detained by INS. The Israelis were eventually released, but coupled with the antics of the dancing Jews that were caught on 9/11 and their front company, Urban Moving Systems, and these suspicious characters and their supposed moving company, is it possible that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania was intended for the Sears Tower in Chicago before the aircraft made an abrupt change of course over the state of Ohio?
Israeli Mossad terrorist operations extend to numerous countries. Here is just one example apart from 9/11 and others that we have briefly covered. As reported in La Voz de Altasan, two men posing as press photographers, one of them a former Israeli colonel and Mossad agent, were arrested inside the Mexican Congress on October 10, 2001, armed with 9mm pistols, 9 grenades, explosives, 3 detonators, and 58 bullets, but were released following intense pressure from the Israeli embassy. The report stated, "We believe that the two Zionist terrorists were going to blow up the Mexican Congress. The second phase was to mobilize both the Mexican and U.S. press to blame Osama bin Laden. Most likely then Mexico would declare war on Afghanistan as well, commit troops, and all the oil it could spare to combat Islamic terrorism." As reported in La Voz de Altasan, Los Angeles, Alta California. In a mind-blowing development, La Voz de Altasan has learned that the Mexican Army General Rafael Marcial Macedo de la Concha, who heads the Procuraduría General de la República, that's the Mexican Department of Justice, has released the retired Israeli Defense Force Colonel and presumed Mossad agent Salvador Gereksin Smeki, an Israeli illegal immigrant, Sar Ben-Sevi, after both had penetrated the security of the Mexican Congress and were in possession of guns, hand grenades, and explosives. This morning, La Voz de Altasan had a personal telephone interview with Mexican Congressional Press Secretary, Licenciada Adriana Lopez, and verified the arrest of two Israelis after they had entered through the highly secure front entrance of the Palacio Legislativo de San Larzo. She stated to La Voz de Altasan that the two terrorists had taken advantage of the situation that had occurred about 1700 hours of Wednesday, October 10th, when a large contingent of sugar industry unionists were entering through the metal detectors. The two Israelis followed about 50 of the unionists to the office of the President of Mexican Congress, Beatriz Paredes. The two Israelis were first pretending to be press photographers, but called attention to the sugar unionists because of their nervous, and out of ordinary behavior. About 10 of the Unionists confronted them and observed that they were carrying guns and what looked to them to be explosives. They held the two Israelis until official congressional security personnel took them into custody. The head of congressional security, Salvador Alarc, verified that the Israelis had in their possession 9 grenades, sticks of dynamite, detonators, wiring, and 2mm Glock automatics. Mexican Congressional Press Secretary Licenciada Adriana Lopez informed La Voz de Altazan in the telephone interview that congressional security then turned the terrorists Salvador Garrison Smeki, age 34, and Sara Ben Zebi, age 27, to the Procuraduría General de la República, Mexican Department of Justice, which is headed by Mexican Army General Rafael Marcial Mesado de la Concha. Initial reports by the Procuraduría General de la República, PGR, were that both Israelis worked for a private security agency and that they both had gun permits. It turned out that there was no connection to either suspect to any private security agency. The PGR has released the retired Israeli IDF colonel with the official explanation that he had a legal permit to carry a gun. They also released the illegal Israeli immigrant on about $4,000 bail and had the case turned over to the Mexican immigration authorities. Mexican Congressional Press Secretary Licenciada Adriana Lopez was surprised to hear from La Voz de Altazan of the release of the two Israelis. La Voz de Altazan has also learned that the Israeli embassy used heavy-handed measures to have the two Israelis released. Very high-level emergency meetings took place between Mexican Secretary of Foreign Relations Jorge Gutman, General Mesado de la Concha, and a top Ariel Sharon envoy who flew to Mexico City especially for that purpose. Elias Luff of the Israeli embassy worked night and day, and their official spokeswoman, Hilla Engelhardt, went into high gear after many hours of complete silence. What went on during those high-level meetings, no one knows, but many in Mexico are in disbelief at their release. Guns and any kind of explosive is highly illegal for Mexican citizens, and the fact that these two Israelis had them inside the Mexican Congress makes their release highly suspect. What is really going on? Jorge Gutman, the Mexican Foreign Secretary, has very strong Zionist connections and himself is of the Jewish descent. Mexican Army General Mesado de la Concha has strong connections to the U.S. military-industrial complex and through this to the Israeli Defense Forces. Have any of these connections influenced the decisions to release the two Zionists?
Former Italian President Francisco Cossega, who revealed the existence of Operation Gladio, told Italy's oldest and most widely read newspaper that the 9/11 terrorist attacks were run by the Mossad, and that this was common knowledge among global intelligence agencies. In what translates awkwardly into English, Cossega told the newspaper Corriere della Sera, all the intelligence services of America and Europe know well that the disastrous attack has been planned and realized from the Mossad with the aid of the Zionist world in order to put into accusation the Arabic countries and in order to induce the Western powers to take part in Iraq and Afghanistan, unquote. The script for Missing Links was originally over 5 hours. Due to time constraints, many key individuals with established connections to 9/11 could not be examined. Here are a few ancillary pieces of evidence and information which you may research in greater detail on your own. It is possible that these will be exhaustively addressed in another film by the makers of Missing Links or by other investigators in the future. We encourage you to do your due diligence elements in investigation. Jack Abramoff. He entertained the supposed lead hijacker Mohammed Atta aboard his yacht. Keep in mind that the argument of this video is that personalities such as Atta were only used as misdirection. Such villains like Osama bin Laden are mere inventions of the Jewish crime network and are thus hardly worth mention, save for their direct connection to the Jews who planned, orchestrated, and benefited from 9/11. Iser Harel, a Polish Khazar Jew who founded Israel's Mossad. He ran Mossad from 1947 to 1963. He was director of Shin Bet from 1948 to 1952 and Haganah. In his career as a Jewish terrorist, he was also intimately involved in the JFK assassination. As a side note, the film which unashamedly shows the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was filmed by Abraham Zapruder. Zapruder is a Jew. The Zapruder film serves as a warning to anyone who would attempt to take on the Jewish mafia. It was absolutely no coincidence that a Jew happened to catch the assassination on video camera. But the topic of the Jewish hand in the JFK assassination is the subject for another film. Getting back to Iser Harel, it is extremely important to mention that Harel predicted in 1979 that the, quote, tallest building in New York City, unquote, would be hit by, quote unquote, terrorists because it was a phallic symbol. The fact that 9/11 was planned by the Jews through the admittance of Iser Harel is documented in a book by Michael Evans. Evans is a Jewish Khazar masquerading as a Christian. This is referred to as a crypto-Jew. Benjamin Netanyahu. When asked on 9/11 what the September 11th attack meant for U.S.-Israeli relations, Netanyahu plainly stated, "It's very good." He also wrote a book in the early 80s titled Terrorism: How the West Can Win. He was the Prime Minister of Israel to whom the Clean Break document, or ACB doc, was presented. Benjamin Chertoff. Benjamin is Michael Chertoff's cousin. This Jewish criminal personality is responsible for writing a hit piece debunking so-called 9/11 conspiracy theories. Benjamin wrote the article for Popular Mechanics. Ever wonder why even the most well-known 9/11 conspiracy movies never bothered to mention the Jewish crime network? We gently suggest that it's time to start questioning not only those who attempt to debunk 9/11 conspiracy theories, but also question the very people who put forth such theories, with nary a mention of the exhaustive facts we have detailed herein that have been readily available to any investigator. Ronald Lauder, a key Cyan, or Jewish criminal asset, cosmetics Estee Lauder magnate, he founded a school for the Mossad in Herzliya called the Lauder School for Government, Diplomacy, and Strategy. Ronald Lauder is also president of the Jewish National Fund and former chairman of New York Governor George Pataki's Commission on Privatization. He is the key individual who pushed the privatization of the World Trade Center and the former Stewart Air Force Base, where the flight paths of the two planes that hit the Twin Towers oddly converged. Ronald Lauder played a significant, albeit unreported, role in the preparation for 9/11. Amit Yoren, founder and director of Guardian. He went to West Point and became the manager of computer network security for the Pentagon and Secretary of Defense. Yoren went on to serve as the czar of cybersecurity for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which is run by criminal Jew Michael Chertoff. Stephen Kaufman, program leader for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, cover-up of World Trade Center 7 crimes. Even after 7 years, NIST releases a report reaffirming the official fairy tale about the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. Kroll Associates. Kroll Associates was responsible for revamping security at the World Trade Center after the 1993 terrorist bombing. Douglas France of the New York Times reported in 1994. This is a crucial point because those who controlled security at the World Trade Center are prime suspects in the demolition of the Twin Towers. The first plane struck directly into the computer room of Marsh, or Kroll USA, in the North Tower. Or rather, it was precision-guided on 9/11. Israeli Aerospace Industries, prime suspect for leasing possible flight termination systems, FTS technology-equipped airplanes to the airlines. IAI is ran by Shalom Yoren.